Hi, fellow historians. Today I want to take you along to my visit to Jamestown and the surrounding areas in late August 2021. And while I'll be sharing some content, I want you to really take in the imagery and observe what would it be like to be one of the Powhatans at this time, or maybe one of the English settling in the lands of Virginia. What do you see? What would you try to eat? How would you protect yourself? What would you try to make? Just things to take in. All right, so join us. So first stop, we have a site of where some of the Powhatans' villages were, which is along the York River. Feel free during this video to pause at any point to be able to read the signs better. Hopefully you can see I tried to capture just all the waterways and inlets that protected, well, you can say it protected the English from the natives and the Spanish, or you might look at it as protecting the natives from the English and the Spanish. So check out some of the area. I was hoping you could hear some of the audio of the wind there. Some things I noticed were just how many shells. Oh, and that's a naval base. That definitely wasn't there in 1600 something something. But check out all the shells that were there. I wondered, were they there in the 1600s? Were they just a few miles away from Jamestown, too far away for the English to see? Is that something they would have ate if it was there back then? That's something I think I want to do some research on. Now, somewhere between 5 and 10 miles from there is the city of Gloucester in Virginia, a small town with lots of historical buildings. And they had this statue dedicated not too many years ago to Pocahontas. Notice how young she looked there, not like the Disney movie. I also want to show you that they had lots of historical markers, some that highlighted both the conflict and the trade between the local natives population and the English. Now we're going to pull up to Jamestown. Once again, you see all the waterways. And I want to pull up here to show you an image of a recreation, not a recreation, a reenactment, I guess. What do you call that? Like a boat, like the old boats. You know what I'm talking about. A model? There's a word for that. What is it? Okay, now I want to pause and show you guys some of the signs here. So this sign shows that although the land of Jamestown was really poor for the English, that many years ago it was larger and drier and more habitable. And about 2,000 years ago, the natives did live here, as evidenced by archaeology digs at campsites. And they also saw evidence that there were cornfields here. But by 1607, this was only grounds for some hunting and some fishing, not for permanent settlement. And that's what made the English mistakenly think that this was completely uninhabited land. This sign points out that even though we often think of the failures of being able to grow crops at Jamestown, it wasn't always the case. Sometimes this land was good for farming. It was great for growing certain trees for timber. And actually, who did most of the farming? They had the Indians clear land to grow some of it. Also, that the swamps were good for certain livestock in the area. So the kids and I really got a kick out of this sign. And it's about the significance of building fences. So when they were settling here, there were lots of pigs and goats and chickens, and basically they roamed free. But what would they do sometimes? Well, eat the gardens of other people. This would really be a problem if the food supply was low, right? So basically the assembly had instruct people like, you need to put fences around your gardens and orchards, and if someone else's animals eat them, it's not their fault because you should be protecting your area. And John Smith actually wrote about this in 1629. Another touching part, if you will, of visiting Jamestown is going slightly to the northeast to the area that was like a second community called Newtown. And here you can find the graves of Travis Sims and his family. And you're able to read them, and it actually mentions the names and the young children that are buried there with them. So seeing things like that really makes you pause and reflect about the different struggles families faced while trying to build this community here. Okay. Another important sign informs us of the early African residents to Jamestown. And according to records, the earliest date they were known to have lived there was in 1619. And that's when John Rolfe wrote about a ship that docked there, and who came off were about 20 Africans. And they were brought in by the leader, George Yardley, and also a merchant, Abraham Piercy. And scholars are not quite sure whether they were slaves in the form that we knew it, or were they indentured servants. Either way, they had to labor basically without pay for those in Jamestown. The sign also notes that according to records of Yardley's, in 1625 he had 24 servants. Of them, 3 were African men and 5 were African women. And they actually excavated where some of those servants lived and worked not too long ago, back in 1995. So an early part of our history that's so important. You can also find here the remains of the Travis estate. So from the 1630s through the 1800s, the Travis family were one of the 2 big families who remained at Jamestown, and some of their gravestones are still there as well. Once in the 1690s, when the capital of Virginia moved to Williamsburg, Jamestown really went into decline. And by 1747, there were really only about 3 or 4 homes there. But there were 2 main families that lived at Jamestown and owned the property, and that was the Amblers and the Travis family. And ironically, celebrating the creation of Jamestown, its anniversary, its founding in 1822, they had a celebration, and the Travis estate burned to the ground. Later this year, we're going to be learning about the Civil War. So let's learn about Jamestown during the Civil War. Well, Virginia seceded from the Union in April of 1861, and they figured that a really good point to defend Virginia's capital of Richmond would be to have defenses here in Jamestown. So the owner of the time of this area was William Allen. He raised troops to defend this area with his own money. Here they also built earthworks and ditches to defend Jamestown, and it was built by both free blacks, enslaved workers, and some of the troops. Eventually, it was evacuated as federal troops moved in 1862, and this was a big rendezvous spot for enslaved refugees, and it became an important area for those taking an oath after the war as well. And that marks the end of this part of the road trip. I hope you found this informative and maybe even had some fun learning about this. Hopefully we'll go on more road trips this year. And if you go on any of your own, please feel free to share some of the videos or pictures you take and bring us along as well. All right, guys, have a great day.